in a word of prayer before we begin?
Sure. Lord, thank you for this day that you've given us, and thank you for letting us all be able to come here and study your word, Lord. And please help us to learn lots tonight and apply it to our lives. Please be with all of us who are not here tonight due to sickness or traveling, and please bring them here at the next point in time. Give us all wisdom, knowledge, and courage in Jesus' name.
Amen. Thank you for that. Wisdom and knowledge and courage is what I think we all need and pray for. So we're studying the Sermon on the Mount. We're using these questions are from Russ LeBron from Georgia, and then I just moved it around to make it work in this book. So we're using his questions, but of course, certainly most of what we're wanting to be able to do as we look through this sermon that Jesus is giving on the mount, looking down towards the Sea of Galilee. Certainly want to be looking at scriptures and learn how to be citizens of the kingdom. We had a review a few weeks ago leading up to getting us here. We're seeing where Jesus has moved around to, and he's moved down to Jerusalem, and he's come back up. He's gone back over to Nazareth, and then was kind of kicked out of Nazareth. They were going to drag him out to a cliff and throw him off because they didn't like what he was saying. And then he moved over to Capernaum, and he's been teaching in the synagogues in Capernaum for the last little while. And then he goes up on the mount and he begins this sermon that starts in Matthew chapter 5. It's Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7. So hopefully you remember to go ahead and read that at least once through in a week. Hopefully maybe a couple times if you get a chance. I've been trying to read it and then put it on the audio Bible and then listen to it. And that helps. Sometimes it's better to listen. Sometimes it's better to read. Sometimes I do a little bit of both. Have somebody reading it, but I'm following along. Whichever way helps you best to remember this sermon and remember what Jesus is teaching here. One thing we skipped over in the introduction lesson on some of the questions that Russ had here was, how large or small is this sermon from Jesus? And that was one of the things we didn't really cover in the introduction questions. But it's actually, and maybe it surprised you, it surprised me, it's actually larger than the book of Colossians, the letter to the Colossians. It's longer than the letter to Philemon, longer than James, longer than 1 Thessalonians, longer than 2 Thessalonians. Right? So this Sermon on the Mount, actually I guess James is one verse longer. You take out the few verses on the front end and the back end of Matthew 5, 6, and 7. That surprised me. I just didn't realize how long this lesson was that Jesus preached on the Sermon on the Mount. So what we've been studying in the last week is we covered the poor in spirit. We covered those who mourn, and we covered blessed are the meek. Those were the three that we looked at last week. And I forget who it was that said it. One of the commentators I was looking at, he said the Beatitudes are the attitudes that you should be. I thought that was pretty good way to remember it. Not the attitudes that you should do. This isn't a do thing. This is something we should be. The character traits that we should have. Often we think of these sermons like, oh, Jesus is telling us, comparing it to the old law, and then telling us the correct way that we should be doing things. No, Jesus starts out with the attitude that we ought to have, right? The character traits that we ought to have, how to become citizens in the kingdom of heaven. And that starts out with emptying ourselves. We don't come before God standing. We come before God prostrate. We come before God with our face in the ground. Nobody stands up to God. Now, if they talk a big talk here on earth, you'll have some arrogant, sinful people on earth that will, say terrible things, but they won't say terrible things and stand arrogantly before God on the day of judgment. Hopefully, all of us that want to be in the kingdom are already realizing we need to be poor in spirit. If we're poor in spirit, then we can be in the kingdom, right? And that means we can be in the kingdom. It doesn't say, well, one day in the future sometime. We're in the kingdom if we will empty ourselves, realize that we're poor in spirit. Because of our sin, because of our disconnect that we have because of sin from God. So we need to realize our condition. If we truly realize our condition, that obviously leads to mourning, right? We're going to just naturally mourn the sins and the condition we're in because of our sins, because we realize we're separated from God. So that we have to mourn. That's just a natural progression of realizing, where do I stand in front of God? And that's on the ground, right? Prostrate and poor, empty. I have nothing. I have nothing to offer. I don't barter. Nobody barters with God. I have nothing. Because of that, I mourn. I mourn that condition. And when a natural outcome of mourning that condition is you have a meek attitude, right? You wouldn't have an arrogant, boastful attitude. You're going to have a meek attitude. And that doesn't mean weak, and we covered that last week, right? It doesn't mean you're weak. Jesus was meek, and he certainly wasn't weak. And so these are the natural things that happen if we're going to be in the kingdom. We're citizens of the kingdom. So we get into this lesson number 3 here, and we're going to start with the third beatitude right here. Uh-oh, I messed up something. No, the fourth. Yes. 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to start on the fourth. Did we not cover that last
No,
week?
you just covered the first two. Unless
We did. Okay. It's on this one that we're covering. Okay. Well, I reviewed a little bit of what we haven't covered yet. Jumping ahead of myself on the board. There was a reason I put this on the board, because we'll see as we go through our lesson. Some of this stuff I put up on the board, obviously it may mean nothing to you, may not be useful. If it isn't, I can certainly on that front line. I'm just copying this out of commentaries. The word meek, it's not, I didn't make a mistake on prayos or whatever that Greek word is. I don't know Greek, but it's not actually prayers. It's spelled prayers, but it's the Greek word for meek. I had Tanya look this over and she goes, messed something up there. Why'd you put praise in there? I'm like, no, that's not what that is. It's the Strong's word there, and it's how many times it's translated. I don't think we need to spend any time on that, but I think it's good to have the meanings up in front of us so you can look at it real quick and you can see that's at least what some of the Bible dictionaries say for the word meek. It's that mildness of disposition, gentleness of spirit, meekness. What I liked is this one: the meekness toward God is a disposition of spirit in which we accept his teachings or his dealings with us as good without disputing or resisting. You think about that. Why did God do this to me? Why did God... is that my attitude every time I'm upset with God? Why did God this or that, right? And we hear people do that all the time. That's not the attitude that a meek person towards God has, right? We accept whatever God brings our way, we accept. Did you see David going, why in the world Saul chasing me and trying to kill me? I've always been nice to the guy. I play music for me, he throws the spear at me. That's not what I heard David say, right? David didn't do that to his, circumstance that was unjust. The king shouldn't have been chasing him all over the place to kill him. David had only served him. He'd only tried to obey him. He had the opportunity to kill him multiple times and didn't do it. His men wanted him to. David was a perfect example of meekness, right? He had strength. You don't think he could have killed Saul? Hand-to-hand combat, he could have killed Saul, I would imagine. We see how much of a warrior David was and how he fought in battle. So he wasn't weak, but he was certainly meek, and he displays that because he's accepting that Saul is appointed by God. I'm not going to go in there and kill the king that has been appointed by God. That would not be a humble, submissive type spirit. And he was humble and submissive to God. So I kind of like that last one there. I like this also. When you're trying to it's hard, I guess, for us to get a good feeling for meek. What does it actually mean? Well, that submitting to God I liked, but it also involves that self-control. Having the strength and then having the control that goes along with it. So even if it's unjust, something towards me, sometimes we think, well, Well, you hit me, I'm gonna hit you back. I won't hit you, but boy, you hit me, I'm gonna hit you back. That is not a meek attitude, is it? The meek attitude would be like, okay, I'll go the second mile, as we'll see later, Jesus teaching. So that self-control. We see Jesus in the temple. I mean, he's angry, he's flipping all the tables over, he's destroying things. Is he still meek? Absolutely. Was he angry? Yes. Did he sin? No. He showed meekness certainly towards whenever something was pushed directly towards him. He allowed himself to display that attitude of meekness. Now when they started attacking God and disrespecting God and certainly the temple, he took action. Also carries this idea of that voluntary submission. So I am agreeing to go ahead and take the wrong. That's what a meek person would do. A proud or arrogant person would never do that. And certainly if we want to be blessed, we want to be meekness. And this last piece of that voluntary submission, it's really that choice. I'm making the choice. I'm making that decision. I'm going to choose to be meek. Jesus says the meek will inherit the earth. It's interesting that the ones that don't take it, David did not take it. What did he get? The kingdom. He did not take it, though. He could have taken it out. Physically, he could have taken it from Saul almost whenever he wanted, and he did not. He gave it. He gave it to God the way he should have, or he allowed God to handle the situation. But in the end, he inherited the whole kingdom. If you look at, we can read some passages here from Psalm 37. Psalm 37. Anybody have that? I want to read Psalm 37, 7 to 11.
Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not yourself over the one who prospers in his way, over the man who carries out evil devices. Refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Free not yourself, it tends only to evil. For the evildoers shall be cut off, but those who wait for the Lord shall inherit the land. In just a little while, the wicked will be no more, though you look carefully at his place, he will not be there. But the meek shall inherit the land and delight themselves in abundant peace.
I mean, I love this. Again, we were just talking about David quite a bit before we got here, and then we read how David's handling the situation here. Rest in the Lord, wait patiently for him, do not fret. Do we fret? I think we fret a lot. Don't fret. It only causes harm. We should know that, but we still sometimes do it. But those who wait on the Lord, they shall inherit the earth, but the meek shall inherit the earth. This is the attitude that David had, and certainly the attitude that we want to have. This isn't just inheriting, the earth, this physical ground that we're standing on either. It's certainly something much better. We see Jesus talking in Matthew 19. In Matthew 19, 27 to 29, he says, and Peter answered him and said, see, we have left all and followed you, therefore what shall we have? They're just wondering what are they going to receive for following Jesus? Jesus said to them, surely I say to you that in the regeneration, when the Son of Man sits on the throne of his glory, you who have followed me will also sit on the 12 thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel, and everyone who has left houses, or brothers, or sisters, or fathers, or mothers, or wife, or children, or lands, for my name's sake, shall receive 100-fold and inherit everlasting life. That's pretty awesome, isn't it? 100-fold and inherit eternal life. Some of the blessings here that we have for us if we are meek. Anybody have any questions so far? It's a Bible study, and I'm just kind of rolling along here. I don't want to do that every Wednesday here. I want to make sure that we're having some discussion. We'll look at some of the questions here in just a second. In this case, the meek don't rule now, but they will rule in the kingdom of heaven. So although we are citizens, as we learned from poor in spirit, we're in the kingdom. If we're poor in spirit, we're in the kingdom of God. But the meek, we're not going to be ruling. You're not going to see a whole bunch of meek people on earth ruling nations. But what you will see is the meek will rule in the kingdom of heaven. And we already looked at Psalm 37 here. Trust in the Lord, verses 3 to 5. They delight in the Lord. They wait on the Lord. And they put their hope in the Lord. And those are some of the verses we already read. So, blessed are the meek, their reward. They're going to inherit the earth. So if you want to go to the books, we can look at some of the questions here. I know I want to try to balance covering some material and just putting stuff for you to see on the board, like definitions. We don't have to spend too much time with that, but then we won't hit all of the questions as we go through the material, but I would like to look at a few. And one of those is that on number 4 there, that last point under B, really prepare your own definition for meekness after considering the following. If you looked at those in Numbers, Moses, look at the life of Moses, how he acted, and how he reacted to things. Jesus, how he describes himself in Matthew, and then Paul's description of his conduct among the Thessalonians. The attitudes and qualities listed along with meekness or gentleness. So, what did you guys come up with for some of these qualities? I know we just kind of listed some definition for meekness. What are some of the qualities you're going to see in somebody that actually is displaying meekness? One of the ones that are blessed because they're meek. Blessed are the meek.
The things that stuck with me in looking at these passages was humble or humility. He spoke of being a gentleness, kindness, but it's also talked about patience as well. Those are the 4 things that kind of struck me as those. I say patience. He mentioned being long-suffering.
Yes.
Which
I like that. I like that, man.
Which kind of goes hand in hand with what you said with David in your definition of accepting that whatever comes our way is for our good.
Yes.
We may not see it and understand it at the time. Instead of saying, why is this happening to me, but just taking it in stride.
That's right. That's right. Catherine?
Pretty much the same thing. Not arrogant.
Ted?
The term only shows up 4 times in the New Testament, this exact term. One's here in Matthew 5, and 2 others are also in Matthew, both of the times referring to Jesus. Matthew 11, where he tells us to take his yoke upon him and learn from him because he is gentle and humble in heart. It's the exact same term. And then the prophecy given over in Matthew 21 that your king shall come to you gentle and mounted on a donkey, even on a colt. That's that same term. And so we see that demonstrated in Jesus. What does it look like to be meek? It's all the power that is then held in control and check. Not weakness, but it is restrained. And then the last time it's used is actually in 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 4, referring to the adorning of the hidden person of the heart that he encourages the women to have, with the imperishable beauty or of gentleness and a quiet spirit, which is very precious in God's sight. So you kind of see that both in Jesus and in the qualities and characteristics of a woman.
Anybody else?
They had a lot of moral courage. And moral courage to stand up when they needed to stand up. Moses and David stood up, but then at the same time, they have the moral courage to be humble in front of God.
That's a really good point, and that's certainly what we learned from some of these examples here. Another thing I was gonna look at is, given the character of the men listed above, would a meek individually be easily frightened? Not really, right? Again, that doesn't mean like, oh, I just, just saw something like that, but I mean, like, am I literally gonna be afraid of things? I know where my citizenship is, I'm poor in spirit, I know that I'm a citizen in the kingdom of heaven, and if I'm meek, I know that I'm going to inherit the earth. I'm blessed. So certainly that timidness, do we have to be timid? I mean, some of us naturally we might be timid, but generally you don't see that. Lazy, certainly, that doesn't fit any idea of this word at all that we've looked at, right? Certainly not lazy. Certainly not unconcerned. It doesn't mean, oh, I'll just sit back and whatever happens, happens. I don't care what happens. I'm not going to be like that. That's not the attitude that we're looking at here. Uninvolved, weak, compromising. That's not somebody that's meek either. Jesus never compromised and showed great strength and actual anger at times, appropriately. Didn't compromise. Well, you do what you want to do, and I'll do what I want. I'll do what I think is right here, and you do what you think is right, and we'll all just get along. That's not the attitude that we're talking about when we talk about meekness either.
It doesn't mean that you're not ever concerned, but it means you're gonna stand up in spite of your concern. Like, when I applied for my job here, it said on the application, will you work weekends? Well, I said, but there was no place to put an explanation. So I put, yes, I'll work weekends, but then when I was interviewed, I had to explain, I work Saturday and I work Sunday, except, there's this little except, well, I want to go to worship. Well, I'm sorry, it's like an hour away. So it's like, I'll work weekends, but. So that it's, it takes some kind of guts to say that. It's like, well, am I going to lose the job now? So it's not that as Christians, we don't have a little bit of, intimidation when we have to stand up and say something, but it doesn't mean that we don't.
That's right.
Sometimes, or, if there's a dirty joke or something said at work, it doesn't mean it's not going to make us uncomfortable. Sure, it's going to make us nervous to have to say,
That's not appropriate.
can you not cuss in front of, normally it's like, can you not cuss in front of the kids? Well, can you not cuss in front of me?
Yeah.
No.
That's right.
I think it's interesting, Lee, that too, when so many times today, particularly in the world, when somebody says, oh, that person's meek, or we think about some of these terms come to mind. Oh, well, they're easily frightened, they're timid, or they're weak. They're easy to push around, again, those are some of the views that's in the world when they think about what it means to be meek.
That's right, and that's why it's good to have those definitions to start out sometimes, especially if you're studying with people. Sometimes it's good to lay out because people may have all sorts of different ideas for the same words that we're looking at. So looking at baptism, you might want to look, depending on who you're studying with, and explain what that is, and what the Bible context for that is, without just assuming. And this is one of those words that often is not defined correctly. What about this on E? In what way would meekness fall poor in spirit and mourning? Kind of talked about this, but how would that naturally follow? It's just natural that that's the resulting characteristic that I would have, right? When I realize that I am nothing in front of God, I am nothing, I am worthless, which makes me, I have that attitude of poor in spirit. That mourning naturally follows that because I realize the reason why I'm on the ground in front of the Lord, one, because He's the Creator and I'm the creation, but also our relationship is severed because of my sin. That should cause me to mourn, and that just naturally leads to that penitent attitude before God. That leads us to have the attitude towards others then remember the parable? Your guy gets forgiven a whole lot, and then he goes out and he wants to, just beat up his little servant, owes him a couple bucks, and toss him in jail because he doesn't have anything. You wicked and worthless servant. That would be us if we treat fellow man like that after we realize how we stand before God with nothing, and then I'm going to puff up for you. I'm going to show arrogance and pride to you. That would certainly not be the right way to go. We get on to those who hunger and thirst after righteousness. So blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. So real quick, again, you can just look at this. It's nothing that you can't look up yourself and just put. So I just put how many times, kind of like Chad was saying, how many times some of these terms sometimes are used. Sometimes it's a whole lot. Sometimes it's very few. But it means to suffer want, to crave ardently, to seek with eager desire. So that's what hunger is. Now we should all know hunger, right? But it's so good to define. Hunger. I don't think we understand any of this. We just don't understand it. I don't care if we have the definition in front of us. We do not understand this correctly. The next one, I'll throw thirst on there. We maybe understand this a tad bit more if we run around out in the woods for a while and we just didn't have something to drink, or up in the desert. So we might understand this a little bit more. I don't think we truly understand this very well either. It means to suffer thirst. And then spiritually, those who painfully feel their want of and eagerly long for those things by which the soul is refreshed, supported, and strengthened. So, for those two, for hunger and thirst, do we even understand that in America? For the most part? For the most part, we do not. I've been to some really poor countries around the world. And in some of those places, I've told the story of being in the Ukraine years ago, and I was supposed to be guarding the president's helicopter, and I was really guarding the pallet of water that we had for us while we were there. I really felt like that. I truly did. Nobody cared about that helicopter, but boy, you turned your back, somebody was snagging a case of water, right? They really wanted pure, fresh, not filled with rust water, which is what you got when you turned on the taps back then. And I've been in places that were way worse than that. Certainly were in some of the places in Africa that I've been to where there's just abject poverty. I mean, literally, you just don't even know what to do. As an American, you just don't know what to do. You can't stop and help because you just get overwhelmed. I mean, how do you help? I mean, you just don't even know what to do at some places that I've been. Those people are poor. Those people are hungry. Those people understand thirst. I don't think we really understand that here. But it would help probably if we could understand that a little bit, because that's how we're supposed to be spiritually. That same hunger pain, we get a hunger pain because I missed lunch, and it's 5 o'clock. And I feel like, and I even say, I'm hungry. Man, I'm hungry. Is there anything to eat around here? Like, what have I been, 3 hours without eating something? And I'm like acting like I'm starving to death. Or thirsty. Sometimes, we just walk around a little bit. Man, I'm so thirsty. But we're not truly thirsty. We're truly not feeling the hunger pains that I think a lot of people during this lesson, as Jesus is preaching to them, would have understood.
I think Matthew chapter 4 gives a little context to the phrasing. Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness and was tempted by the devil, and after fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry.
A little hungry? Man.
And then one of the first things he says when he gets back is, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. For those who have gone through some fasting, you get a couple days in and it starts to occupy your mind in a way that it didn't a couple days prior, where you're thinking about it a lot. And Jesus had gone for 40 days, 40 nights, tempted, hey, make these stones into bread. And then he demonstrates hunger and thirsting for righteousness more than food, and then turns around and tells the crowd, blessed are you when you hunger and thirst for righteousness.
That's right.
It's a little bit stronger than, if I don't have too much to do, I might make it a church on Sunday.
Yeah.
If there's not anything more important.
We act like we hunger and thirst every Lord's Day now because we have weird times because of our preacher. But we have weird times, so we meet for Bible study at 12 and worship at 1. He preaches in Richmond first, and then, so we moved the times back a little bit. So often, have we even said that? We've said that. I know I've said that. Man, I'm so hungry. It's like 2:30, you know, like, oh, hey, I'm not even gonna hardly make it to, we gotta get somewhere quick because I'm so hungry. It would probably do us good. This isn't part of the lesson, but it'd probably do us good to do some fasting for a purpose. Obviously, there should always be a purpose for that. And maybe the purpose is for me to understand hunger a little bit more. It's done around the world in a lot of different religions and places that I've been to. And I think maybe that would be good. So something to think about when you look at that.
With a lot of the comments that you made, and about like the actions that you were describing as people were taking, trying to take that water, I think that should show in us. It's hard to fake that you're hungering and thirsting, because you will take action. Like, we should hunger and thirst to be with those who are righteous. You know, that to be around what's righteous. Like, us assembling together is such a huge part. And when we were apart earlier on in 2020, it hurt.
Yes.
Even when we were meeting in small groups, it hurts, and it should hurt. We shouldn't be okay. And studying God's word, we're supposed to hunger. And it's just, if you don't actually feel it, you don't understand how to hunger for it.
That's an outstanding point, Brittany, that hungering we did have. And some people still have now. You know, I know up in Canada, they're still locking them down pretty much, and they are hungry. I know when I talk to my mother, she's hungering for being around other Christians. You're stealing some of my thunder, though, for the next slide, but I appreciate getting the mindset there.
If you're viewing these Beatitudes as progression, it's someone who recognizes their poverty before God, someone who is broken, and someone who is then mourning over their sins, who then is no longer asserting their own will, but is looking for God's will. Sometimes you get people who have gone through some of those beginning stages of recognizing, you know, I'm lost in this addiction, or I've washed up my life through my selfish actions and my anger and my abuse of other people. And they get to that point where I don't know where to go, and I don't know what to do, but they still lack that fourth beatitude of desiring righteousness. They don't know what to do, and they're poor and they're meek in that way, and they mourn over their sins, but still don't desire to do right, to be right before God. And so if we're moving in that same progression, then this should be a part of that progression of working towards and moving towards God.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Before we go further here, just throw up righteousness so we can see. I like that the condition acceptable to God. You know, to attain a state approved by God. Those are two important points, right? That if I'm going to be righteous, I'm going to be accepted. Do I have the right? Do I have integrity, virtue, purity of life, righteousness, correctness of thinking, feeling, or acting? Those are all some of the words that you can use to describe righteousness. So Brittany led us into this, and this is the point. Do we truly hunger and thirst for righteousness like we do for food and water? Because we definitely don't miss food and water, right? We don't miss it. America's built on 3 meals a day. I mean, we build our whole schedules around that. That's just how we live our lives, and we would think it would be something terribly went wrong if tomorrow we didn't have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, all 3. Like, could you imagine that happening? We just don't even live like that. When you look at, somebody want to look up Psalm 42, 1 and 2. Somebody else can get Psalm 63, 1.
I'll get 42.
Okay.
What was the other one?
Psalm 63, 1. So Chad has 42 verses 1 and 2.
As the deer pants for flowing streams, so pants my soul for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God?
Have you ever seen a deer panting for water? I won't get into it like honey, so I won't tell you. what happens when sometimes you shoot a deer, they will go to water, wherever they are. They go towards water. They're thirsting, you know, and they're moving towards water. Or just seeing an animal run for a long time. Our dogs got out the other night, and what are they looking for immediately? When they're done, which for our dogs is almost never, but you know, however many hours later, they're trying to find water, right? Their whole body's panting. That's what thirst really is. You know, you've got to get to that water. Literally, they might die if you don't get to water. And we should be like that deer. Psalm 63, 63:1.
O God, thou art my God. Early will I seek thee. My soul thirsteth for thee. My flesh longeth for thee, in a dry and thirsty land, where no water is.
I was going to throw up some other pictures, but I think somewhere on the introduction I showed you where Jesus was tempted, where they say the area was, but I showed you, if you remember that picture of the wilderness, Judean wilderness, it was an aerial shot looking down, all wilderness, but in the corner you could see where Jericho was. That's pretty dry wilderness area. Jake hiked up to Qumran and was looking for some more scrolls that they said did not exist, and then a couple months later they found scrolls there. And I said, Dad, I told you I could have found these scrolls. But when we were up there, part of why I was dragging them down out of those caves in Qumran is because we were smoked. It was 100 degrees, it was super dry, and I know what happens when it's dry, right? Go hiking around in super dry weather with no water, and boy, do you get parched really quick, but really you can get in trouble really quick. And I didn't want the boys when they were younger to get in trouble, and we were a long way away from getting the water, so that's part of the reason I was trying to save his life, but kept him out of the history books. So, but in that area, it's terrible, because you can even see water down there, because it's a Dead Sea, you can't drink any of it, which makes it even worse, looking at what looks like water. I can't imagine being stuck out to sea, and you're thirsty to death, and you can't drink anything. So do we passionately desire to do God's will? Do we desire to be right with God? These are all parts of this, hungering and thirsting. Or our desires for everything else. And that's generally Americans, right? We're desirous of a lot of things, but often it's not that hunger and thirst for righteousness. It's for my desires. Whatever I'm desiring today is what I'm thirsting, hungering for. I go after, I'm trying to get a hold of. And that shouldn't be the case for us as Christians. Brittany's point was well made. We were hungering and thirsting for a while. We were out in a park where we got this place. It was raining sideways. We had our phones on. It was dark that night. We were trying to see our Bibles. It was hard. But what we were hungering for as well is the other members that weren't with us, and we miss each other. Do we long to come here? I'm excited to come here I was really tired tonight, but I was still really happy and excited to come. And I hope that you all are too. I hope we're always excited and looking forward to, as tired as we might be, especially midweek sometimes, but Sunday, I mean, I'm excited. Like, are we excited to come and worship God? I hope we all are. And that's how we should be. Do we long to desire to study God's Word? Do we long for heaven? Do we long to be in the presence of God? I mean, long to bring. I don't want to die tomorrow. You know, I'd like to see the boys grow up. I'd like to spend more time with Tanya. I'd like to be here for a while longer. But more than that, I want to be with God. I want to be in the presence of God. More than all those things. We need to long for heaven. And sometimes we say heaven. I don't really like saying, I started changing to try to not say I'm longing for heaven as much as longing to be in the presence of God, because that's what heaven is. I always thought heaven is whatever you make it to be. You know, you like motorcycles, heaven's a whole bunch of motorcycles, or it's a pile of gold, or it's streets of gold, or whatever crazy things that we think are impressive. And heaven is all that and everything on top of that too. But it's truly being in the presence of God. Do we desire to be at home? To be in the presence of God for all eternity? I hope we do. And if we do, we're going to be blessed. If we hunger and thirst for righteousness, God says we'll be filled. I knew I'd be running behind here. Blessed are the merciful. You can read some of these yourselves, but the root word here for mercy, since it's only merciful, is only 2 times translated in the New Testament. Root word means to have mercy on, to help one afflicted, or seeking aid. help the afflicted, bring help to the wretched, have compassion, have pity. We all know the story, so we won't read it, but you remember the story of the Good Samaritan, going down. That's a real steep road too, going down from Jerusalem down to Jericho. So, that, you've got all these people that should have stopped, right? Like the preacher for sure is going to stop. Oh, he goes with it on mine, right? It wasn't the preacher, but you've got all these people that should have been religiously know that they should stop and help somebody on the side of the road, and they're just going to blow on by it, or even worse, pretend they didn't even see Chad over there, right? I'm just going to go this way. We just go put our blinders on and just go past people. Hopefully we don't do that. Sometimes I've done that and I thought, man, why didn't I stop? I should have stopped there. I saw, this person maybe needs some help, but I'm busy. I'm hungry. I gotta get some food or something. And we blow right on by. We didn't even make sure that we're with the Good Samaritan. The guy that shouldn't have stopped, the guy they always make fun of, those rotten Samaritans, that's the guy that stopped. And we know the story. He does everything. And he goes way above and beyond just to help them out. That person was merciful. That Samaritan was merciful to somebody that really he shouldn't have been in their society merciful to. And it's not just a feeling. When I was looking through this, I thought that was pretty important too. Sometimes I think it's some feeling. It's not a feeling. Mercy causes us to act, right? It's that compassion. It's showing that pity for somebody. Anybody have any comments? Oh, I thought you were putting your hand up.
I can make a comment if you
Sure,
want.
go for it.
You mentioned it's only translated twice. The other time is over in Hebrews, where he describes Jesus again
Yes.
as becoming a merciful high priest for us. All the characteristics you see in the Beatitudes are exemplified in him. That's all the things he asked for us to do, and all the things that he would wish us to become are the things that he has already laid out a pattern for how to be.
What do we remember one of the greatest acts of mercy that Jesus says?
Forgive their sins, for they know not what they do.
Ones that just nailed him to the cross, and that's what he's saying? Had no sin. He's actually going on that cross for them, and he said, we think of Stephen as he's being stoned, all right? That's that's the example we want to follow, right? James 2 and 13, for judgment is without mercy to one who has shown no mercy. That's pretty powerful, isn't it? For judgment is without mercy. You are going to receive zero mercy if you can't show mercy. And especially if you can't show mercy to your human, is it John talking about love? How can you say you love God and you don't love your brother whom you can see? If you don't love your brother who you can see, how can you love God? Well, here's another angle on that mercy. You want God? I want God to show me mercy. I hope God will show me mercy one day when I stand before him at Judgment Day. But is he going to go, well, you showed no mercy. So guess what? The way you treated people, that's how I'm going to treat you. You're going to get no mercy. That's not what I want. Right? So we better make sure that we don't get what we deserve. And by not getting what we deserve, that would behoove all of us to make sure that we learn how to be merciful. And sometimes we think people don't deserve it. I've said those words. He doesn't deserve it. She doesn't deserve it. Wow. I better check myself, right? Better check myself. Because I deserve a whole lot that I don't want. Blessed are the merciful, the reward, for they shall obtain mercy. 2 minutes, so I can't pick from the 10 or so questions I wanted to look at here. But how can we demonstrate mercy towards others? How can you, tomorrow, or this week, demonstrate mercy to others?
Be forgiven. Give up the grudges.
Helping those in need. Next time let's not fly right by that person. And I'm not telling some of the ladies, maybe, you know, there's some weird stuff and times where maybe you should just drive on. And you know, I don't want people to not do the right things, you know, there's some common sense we have to have, but it means, I've driven by and I really wish I would have stopped. Well, next time, maybe I turn around and go back, right? Those are the things that we need. Do we need to show mercy? We need to show help to those that are in need. Really, it has that general attitude, do I care? And this goes back to Chad's lesson on Sunday, or the Bible class on Sundays. Do we actually care? Because if I don't care who lives back behind here and around here, and I don't care that these souls are lost, I just said, I have no mercy for them, but yes, I want God to give me mercy. So, do we actually care? I think that's a good way to show mercy. Are we trying to make those connections? Are we trying to make those, take advantage of the opportunities we have to teach our coworkers or our friends or our neighbors about the Lord? That's showing mercy because we know they're lost. Those that are lost, they need God's mercy more than they even need mine. But am I going to care enough about them to try to teach them the gospel? Anybody have any final?
Diving back into the idea of these characteristics as being a progression, you see this a lot in people who hit rock bottom. They mourn over where they are in their life, and they begin to lose some of that pride and admitting they have faults and need help. Even in people who then desire righteousness, who begin to seek for God through that process. When they're begging God for forgiveness, you can still see them harboring hate and ill will and blame for other people in their life. That comes through sometimes very clearly, even whenever they are broken. And Jesus is saying you need to get rid of that out of your heart as well. Where the idea of holding something against somebody else, or blaming people for the circumstances that you are in, cannot be if you're still going to call on God for mercy.
That's right.
And so this is chipping away at every part of our selfishness, every part of our self-entitlement through all of the Beatitudes. And I think sometimes the idea of being merciful, we have that on a quick, oh, you bumped me in the grocery store, I'll forgive you. And we think, oh, we've done really good with this, while we still harbor a lot of resentment and a lot of anger at other people in our past, and that we're unwilling to give up, even though we want God to forgive so freely and easily for us.
And we're not even supposed to worship until that's taken care of, right? Remember leaving your gift at the altar and going making it right and coming back. All right, we're out of time. Russ had these in that first question there as these three being focusing on the inward man, and then these ones, the attitudes focusing on the relationship with God. So, everybody racks and stacks and lines these up differently. There's a lot of different ways that you can look at these, but I thought that was interesting how he described or broke these the attitudes up. All right, next week we'll cover the last ones here on lesson 4, and then continue on into the Sermon on the Mount. Thank you. We'll break for just a minute here as we prep for the invitation.